Good morning, everybody. And again, I would like first to thank Professor Robert and Sandra for their good hospitality and their invitation to give me opportunities to attend this conference. And this is the first time I'm including in your group. So, as Professor Kaltoum already explained and talk about the questions of our presentations, so I will not repeat these questions, but I would like to say that data show that MENA's achievements in health and education during 1918s and 1919s compared favorably with those of other regions. On the other hand, women's labor force participation remained low, and women were underrepresented international parliaments and in other decision-making bodies. The Middle East grew with an average of 6% over 2005, up from 5.6% over 2004, and an average growth of 3.5% over the late 1990s. Overall, women's share of the total labor force increased from 26% in 2000 to 28% in 2005. All the progress on this indicator during 2000 and 2005 was greater than in any other region. MENA countries to lag, especially when high growth is taken into account. Similarly, at present, women's participation in the labor market, percent of female population aged between 15 and 64, varies within MENA. The lowest is in the West Bank and Gaza, this 11%. The highest is in Djibouti, it's 55%. The second highest is in Kuwait, 50%, when the large foreign workers population is included. This point we have to concentrate because the Kuwait's population is not including really in this data. Unemployment is a bigger issue for women, for men in Iraq. For example, men unemployment is much higher than female unemployment. A serious regional concern is the high unemployment rate. The largest difference between male and female unemployment can be found in Egypt, 6 versus 24%, Syria, 8 versus 24%, Bahrain, 8 versus 32%. And the same applies in the West Bank and Gaza and in Yemen. An interesting observation I observed during reading the reports internationally is that higher levels of female education don't necessarily translate into lower female unemployment. Data from several countries show that among women who participate in the labor force, unemployment is more concentrated among educated women. There is also a question of how women benefit from new job opportunities. And Professor Kaltoum already reached to the results that the education, and especially higher education, is not necessary for women to get a job. In the opposite, maybe it will cause many problems for them to get a suitable job. So if you will see here in the data, in the graph or picture, that we will see the score of and the range of many countries in Bahrain and Jordan and Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, I concentrated here in Syria 2 times because we will see the difference between the indicators in 2007 and in between 2011 till 2014. Syria, of course, achieved a higher indicators in many aspects, but unfortunately, due to all events, violence and war and civil wars, all indicators is going down. So we are asking what the Arab Spring gave to the people in the region. They gave only this structuring in the society and this structuring in economy and no peace and unstable situation in the whole countries which are running or going in the spring, in Arab Spring. So you will see here, of course, in economic level and in education level, in health education, and of course, in the whole countries, the political indicators is very low. But in some countries, the health indicators is very high, and education also indicators is very high, but in economic participation is not very high. If we will see the labor force participation in female and male, you will see in Syria, for example, female, how the indicators show. Here and here the male, Saudi Arabia also, and the ranks is very high. That means between 120 and 114. All these countries, including also Kuwait, even though the indicators is comparing with the other countries, is that means Kuwait, you see the female between 14 and 16. And this is what I mentioned also because the foreign workforce including in the statistics. And in Qatar also, the same pictures. In United Arab Emirates, a little bit, even though the education level is very high, but in the labor force participation, you see their range or between 14 and 16. But in Yemen, you see the labor force participation, for example, it's interesting. That means you see here, female is the range between 20 and 14. That means female, they are working even though in the house and they earning money for their families. And in Jordan and in Saudi Arabia as well. So literacy rate, some countries, they have a big gender disparity in this indicator. For example, here in Yemen, you see the gender gap between male and female. And in Syria also the gender gap, but it's better from Yemen. Oman also they have a gender gap, but the range is very high. In Oman and Saudi Arabia and etc. If you will see the other countries like United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait, you will see that the gender gap between female and male in literacy already they solve this problem because you see it's a little bit gender gap between two sexes. But again, when we are talking about the labor force, the pictures is totally different. So access to education. Many female, they are enrolled in so-called education. For example, they like medicine and education, basically. But if we will say in medicine, they like, for example, dentistry and ophthalmology, and but they didn't like, for example, brain surgery or other field of medicine. The lower proportion of men entering universities indicates that men find it easier to access job and economic opportunities. So we need the balancing work and family role in these aspects, and also we need reform in the school curriculum, which concerned in many concepts of gender issues and gender problems. So, MENA has experienced great progress in reducing the male-female disparity in education. Female enrollment at all levels of education has increased significantly. In 2000, the ratio of girls to boys in primary and secondary education was 88%. This percentage had increased to 92% in 2004 and is now almost equal to the world average. What about the women scientists in the Arab world? The Western media reflects an image that poor education and the type of religion practiced are directly correlated. Gender inequality is specific only to Muslim countries. We will see, is this the picture is true, or we have different indicators and information. And what about women scientists in the Muslim world? You see interesting data that the fact is that the United States falls behind 6 Muslim countries in the percentage of women graduating in science to the total science graduate population. The other picture, the countries whose ratio of women science graduated exceed that of the United States and Bahrain and Brunei and Dar es Salaam and Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Qatar and Turkey and Morocco. Morocco and Turkey exceeds the United States in the ratio of women engineering graduate as a percentage of in science of the science graduated population. So that means the indicators show that in some aspects Muslim women, and especially in Arab countries like Morocco and Qatar and Lebanon, they exceed even the United States of America. We constitute the half Muslim population in the world. Our existence in working world is pressurized by various factors. First, traditions and culture, economic independence, male domination, and parents' suppression and community pressure. Being a wife and mother, this is the main objectives for women, and housekeeping, responsibility of children, and responsibility of parents and parents-in-law. So what we have to do? We have to hard worker and harder, never have your experiment task on the next day, try to be good wife and excellent mother because family is over everything, try to be a good housekeeper because when you step in your home, you are not a professor anymore. This is unfortunately because we haven't dialogue in the family. And stereotype of gender still, until we will have an equity relationship between the families, so we can ignore this factor. But nowadays, this factors is playing a big role. Try to be a good housekeeper, because when you are step in the home, you are not a professor anymore. Make a good balance between your daily house life and scientific life. Try to force your conditions and don't be afraid of competing with your male colleague. Be optimistic. So in conclusion, what I can say, the national policy frameworks play a key role in influencing the magnitude and scope of gender gaps. Most countries around the world have instituted some form of national machinery to promote a gender mainstreaming across various policy areas. Governments of the Arab countries must support their women citizens, particularly to create new success stories and use women intelligence for benefit of their communities, give more chance, apply positive discrimination to women, and regional variation in the size and type of gender gaps correspond to different mechanisms established at country and regional level for addressing these specific gaps. Here in the last, I would like to speak in details, but due to the lack of time, because I have data from the survey have done by the World Bank and UNESCO, but the lack of the time is not encouraging me to give all these details. But the real problems is sharing with the North Africa, even though the population is difference between, for example, in Yemen and in Syria or in Egypt. In Tunisia, they have only 6 million.
No,
11 million. While in Yemen, we have 33 million. And in Egypt, we have 80 or maybe now 100 million. So the population also play a big role to achieve many objectives and policies. In the final, I would like to thank you for your attention.